as a country, we spend about $200 billion a year to run buildings in this country. That's everything that's not an industrial facility or a home. We spend about another $200 billion on our industrial facilities. And what we know is that on average, 20 to 30% of that energy is wasted. And so through the Better Buildings Challenge, we work with over 350 organizations who have really stepped up to lead the way for the rest of the country. These organizations have not only committed to a portfolio-wide reduction in their energy use, but I would argue equally importantly, they're sharing what they're doing and how they're doing it. The goal here is to have the market understand what leaders are doing and be able to follow what they're doing. Because if everybody has to reinvent the wheel from square one, we're never going to get where we need to be as a country in terms of the tens of billions, hundreds of billions of dollars there is in energy savings. But that also means environmental savings, pollution savings. And so there's a whole bunch of reasons that the Department of Energy cares. We are very excited to be here with Iron Mountain today. One of the things that we have done since the start of the Better Buildings Initiative is to profile what our partners are doing as part of that legacy of pathways and leadership examples, and have people understand what real partners are doing in the real world and why it works and the experience they're having, with the hope that others can learn and follow their example. Because of the pandemic, we have taken the opportunity to tour, I say in quotes, Iron Mountain's data center efficiency projects virtually, but we think we've done that in a really fun and exciting way today. And Iron Mountain, I don't want to steal too much of their thunder, but they really are quite notable for a whole variety of reasons. You're going to see a bunch of projects that they've done. They've also achieved their first goal as part of the Better Buildings Challenge, and we're excited that they're working with us on another goal. So we're very, very excited. Before we get into Iron Mountain and the team describing their work, we wanted to just play a short video for you that gives you just a taste of what Jim and Jamie and maybe Julia will talk a little bit about moving forward. So on behalf of Hannah and I from the Department of Energy, we are just thrilled to be here. We're excited to profile what you're doing. Iron Mountain, thank you for all the work you're doing. You are really helping lead the way. As we know, data centers are really an important part of the US, really the global economy, and the work that you're doing to help showcase and illustrate and prove that energy efficiency is a very smart business strategy while helping our environment, saving money and creating jobs is really, really important. So we're thrilled to be with you here today. And with that, let's go ahead and just roll this very short video that highlights the energy advances you've made. Wonderful. Well, I hope that whet everyone's appetite to hear more from the Iron Mountain team about what it is they're doing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Jim Henry. As he mentioned, he is the manager of global compliance at Iron Mountain Data Centers. And I think he's going to walk us through some of those projects specifically. And again, we've built in time for questions that people have. So Jim, I know you'll go through this fairly quickly. And I know I'm excited because I've seen your deck. I'm excited to have you share some of the photos and some of the real work that you've done at data centers across the Iron Mountain portfolio. So with that, James, thanks for being here today. Go ahead, take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maria. One thing I really love talking about is data centers. So even though I'll probably ramble on a little bit for the sake of brevity, I'll try to do my best. So data centers are really interesting, and we can probably flip to the next slide and start talking about our journey. But we joined Better Buildings Challenge in 2016, and we really got rolling in 2017 with our energy management efforts. Why is this important? I think is the first question that some folks might ask. Data centers are kind of in a dark corner of the world, but I think recently they've been coming to light more when we think about sustainability, energy management, and really managing our global economy at the same time taking care of our planet. The reason being is because even though I love data centers, one of the things about the data center industry is that we emit just as much CO2 as the airline industry. It's pretty crazy. So with that said, something must be done, right? So we've got to be able to scale business with sustainability. What that means is that, of course, when someone wants to develop a new application, or you want to stream your video or play your video games or send your emails or store your pictures, that all lives in the cloud somewhere, or the cloud, right? Or even when you're using mobile banking, right? It all lives in the cloud. Well, we are the cloud, essentially. We're where all that happens. We're where the magic happens. So we had to do something about it. And back in 2016, 2017, we entered the Better Buildings Challenge with our commitment that you see on the screen. And we wanted to, basically just get more energy efficient. Without getting into specific numbers and things like that, we wanted to set a meaningful goal. We did reach that in 2019 around our non-IT energy or our IT energy intensity. But data centers are measured in a number of ways, and our new goal is set around power utilization efficiency, power utilization effectiveness. There's many different names for it, but PUE, right? It's how close your IT load or all of the computers are, running inside of your data center, how close you can get to that ceiling of the total electricity load of the building, IT load and non-IT load. So we want to decrease the PUE number to get that deviation closer together by 30% over 3 sites by 2025. And the better that PUE number is, it's essentially the less overhead you have running the site. So that's a meaningful commitment that we wanted to make. And we have a number of sites in the U.S., Asia Pacific, and in Europe. And a subset of the U.S. sites are in the challenge because they're high performing sites, they're high intensity sites, big sites, very unique sites. And we'll walk through some of the projects that we have going on at those sites in the next few slides. Next, please. So one of the things that we've been working on really, this is our VA1 data center. It's located in Prince William County in Manassas, Virginia. This was built in 2017, fully commissioned in 2017. We've, since 2017, really worked on the energy efficiency of the building in terms of setting things up. So when you actually move in it, when you're a customer and you're moving stuff into a data center of ours, you're contributing to how well we run the building, because when it's empty, it's just kind of running with nothing in it. But again, the closer you get those two numbers together, that IT load and that facility load, the more efficient you're going to be, the less overhead and energy you're wasting on just cooling empty space. And that's how data centers are measured. Now, of course, we're going to use more energy by default, because we have to power all those applications, all those servers, and everything that's going into the data center. But we have increased our energy efficiency at that site a lot. And some of the other things we have going on that measure that are our ISO 50001 and 14001 programs. We're certified at every single one of our sites in our portfolio. So US, outside of US, period. By default, we hold all of our sites to the same standard when it comes to energy efficiency and environmental management. And we're trying to do as much as we can in those arenas. But as a data center provider, it takes a lot to make a difference, but there's still a lot of low-hanging fruit too. Another great point that we drive home is that even though we're being as energy efficient as we can, a big theme in the industry, and it's important and it's meaningful because we need to move to a more green, so to speak, society, is that we're powered by 100% renewable energy. So renewable electricity rather. So not only are we trying to be more energy efficient, and we're being responsible with the energy that that's coming into the building, it's got to be renewable as well. And then what we do with that, and you'll see a little logo down in the bottom left corner, is through ISO 50001 and 14001, we ensure that we can pass that on to our customers that are in our building. So naturally, if your servers are in our building, and we're purchasing renewable energy, and contributing to these great renewable projects all over the country that are, sometimes really local to our data centers, so it's very meaningful. We want to be able to pass that through to you, and we can, right? So that's a big hallmark of our program, that not only we're 100% renewable, but inside of the data center, we work with you to actually make sure that we're using that power responsibly. And then also, lastly, here we've got the fact that we've joined the Better Buildings Waste Pilot, and we're looking at different ways to increase our landfill diversion rate. Net zero waste is a really interesting and impactful thing to try to get to. And in the data center industry, we've got a lot of stuff that is, needs fixed, right? Putting pressure on the manufacturers and things like that to stop using polystyrene, and how we can recycle, et cetera. But again, for the sake of time, we'll move to the next slide. So just to kind of glaze over some of the projects and things that we've done in data center, and just to kind of go back to why data centers should be more energy efficient and how, it's all about air. So it seems kind of funny at face value, right? But I always say that, like, we provide 4 things: space, power, cooling, and security, right? So you've got to secure the assets inside the building, make sure everyone's safe, et cetera. We've got to power it. We power it with renewable energy. There's a bunch of space inside the building that gets consumed by our lovely customers. And then the cooling. And the cooling part and the power part and the space part equally go together to create an air management strategy. Because when you've got all this space and you've got power, cooling, and the power is actually feeding into the cray units and all the air handlers and everything like that, you're throwing around a lot of air to keep these servers cool. And despite what you may see in movies and on TV and here, data centers don't have to be as cool as you think. There are best practice standards out there, definitely around temperature and humidity, but getting it to its optimal humidity and temperature is the whole goal. And then being able to do responsible things with that air, not just throwing hot air around, not just throwing cold air around, and not being able to recirculate it in the right way, because then you end up using more energy to cool things back down to where they should be and dehumidify things to where they should be. So with that said, in Kansas City, the team there does a fantastic job. And, it would be remiss of me to not just mention how great our operations teams are, because they're the ones that drive these initiatives home. I always say that I'm simply an end user, right? I can kind of communicate the standard around 50,001 and 14,001 and talk about, what we have to do and what we should do. But at the same time, our operations teams actually make it happen. So that's a theme through these three sites. So here in Kansas City, we've got a number of air management practices where they used cold and hot aisle containment, fine-tune the building management system, turning down fan speeds to use less electricity, and then ultimately get to a good place with air management and energy practices. Next, LED lighting throughout the data center. And this is a project that I think we've got at a couple other sites too, even those that aren't in the Better Buildings program, because it just makes sense, right? Not only is it more sustainable, it's the right thing to do. And, since our baseline year at this site, it's a very small site too. It's in Kansas City, Missouri. It's underground, but we have improved the PUE by 3% since our first year. And 3% doesn't seem like a lot maybe on paper, but in a data center, when you're using a lot of electricity, it makes a difference. Next slide, please. And this is just a picture of what an empty data center looks like. We don't have many of these because our customers fill them quickly, and data center space is scarce, in demand. And this just gives you, like, this is a small data hall, and then you'll see in a couple slides, like, a really big one. So if you've seen one data center, like, you'll see the racks here with some air management tiles. These are perforated floor tiles. This would be a cold aisle because you're seeing, like, cold air would come in, they would enter the front of the racks, and then hot air would blow out of the back of the actual servers and then be recirculated into plenums, and then come back up after it gets cooled through the tiles. So if you've seen one data center, you've seen them all with a little bit of nuance, and I'll talk about that next. Next slide, please. So Manassas, Virginia, this is a site that's fairly new, like I said. So when you've got a new site, what's really interesting about the kind of dynamic is, what could you possibly do, right? Everything's brand new. You've got new equipment with economizer mode. You're doing things like free cooling to bring the cold air in to cool the data center when it's wintertime. What could you possibly do? And the answer here is just keep an eye on when folks are moving in, making sure we're working with customers to do air management best practices, blanking panels in the racks, which you can see as part of this photo. Above those servers with all those and those storage arrays with all those drives, you'll see these flat plastic panels. That prevents air from just going through, right? Because we don't want to waste any air. Wasting air results in higher electricity bills, just like in your own home. So you want to manage that air. So we're looking at hot aisle, cold aisle containment, industry standard stuff, floor blanking when we're not using certain parts of the data halls, but then also really unique things like custom ducting for our customers who might have old gear that blows side to side, and IT folks will know what I'm talking about when I say that. Custom ducting so we can get the air to the back of the rack rather than blowing out the side and screwing up the air management. And then also working with some different firms on tuning the building management system on a quarterly or semi-annually basis. And then utilizing a pilot with some AI software to look at our building management system and see where we can make improvements even outside of the air management, right? So even outside of the HVAC system and some of the mechanical stuff, looking at pump speeds and other things to ultimately get that peak performance of a brand new site to bring that PUE to its lowest possible level. And as said on this slide, 20% improvement since baseline, and this is just the beginning for Manassas because there are 2 buildings on a campus that will ultimately hold 4. And when we started, we just started with 1 building. So now we've got 2. There were some pictures in the video of that campus. It's absolutely lovely. And there's going to be a lot of growth there. Next slide, please. This is an empty data hall. This is a fairly big one. They get much bigger. But you can just see with no customers in here, it's a very lonely, white looking data hall. But when you get everyone in there, the hum, you can hear the hum of the servers and it never gets old. Then the infrastructure behind all of that is what you can see right here. So this is an electrical area where you'll see some, like we have battery rooms, electrical rooms, HVAC and mechanical rooms, all of the things that those lovely operational teams that I spoke about earlier maintain to make sure that these data centers run at optimal power usage effectiveness. Next slide, please. There we go. So last but not least, I'm partial, but I'll talk about probably my favorite site in the entire portfolio. About 30 minutes from this site, and it was the first Iron Mountain data center that I ever visited when I started with Iron Mountain. It is the Western Pennsylvania data center. For those of folks that are familiar with Iron Mountain, this is what we refer to as the underground. It is essentially retired limestone mine, 220 feet underground. We have a lake. I always preface that by saying, like, I'm not lying. We actually have a lake. It is part of the natural Western Pennsylvania water table, and we utilize that lake for geothermal cooling for what we refer to as phase 1 of the Western PA data center. There's a lot of air management practices in place here. And it's really interesting because we're underground. So it's actually naturally kind of really cool. If you go back to the part of the data center that I'm talking about, and we have a pretty vast area down there. It's a huge, huge underground area, and data center is just part of it. But it's about like 50 to 57 degrees year round. So if you're down there, obviously no windows because you're in a mine. You really don't know what time of the year it is. So it's naturally cool down there. We utilize things like free cooling, pushing cold air in from the outside in the cooler months, as well as the geothermal system with the lake to cool the data center. And of course, we work with customers as much as we can on getting their actual, when they have a really dense rack, that's great. But if they don't, getting the blanking panels in there, working with them on containment, trying to get the building management system tuned to its optimal level. And then, obviously the the most important thing here is to keep an eye on it. So trending the data, looking at the data year after year with the rest of our sites as part of ISO 50001. And one of the things that I failed to mention earlier is that, you know, customers moving out and customers moving in can fluctuate PUE, right? But taking that out of the equation and looking at raw energy improvements, we've made a 34% improvement in PUE since our baseline back in 2016. So that's a really significant improvement, and the operations team there is totally to thank for that, because they've worked on all these projects that move us forward. And I know we're running short on time, so we can go to the next slide, and I'll show you a little bit of what I call home here in Western Pennsylvania. This data hall is referred to as SC15, or Secure Compute 15. That's about, so if you can see, there's a little bit of a cage there at the end of that photo. That's halfway. It's only halfway. This thing, I forget how long these data halls are, but they're like 13,000 square feet, massive, and you can see the stone wall off to the right because it's limestone, and we paint it white. We put like a rhino lining over it, and our design and construction teams do a fantastic job when we build these things out underground. And I know firsthand it's really difficult to do things underground, whether it's construction or anything else. It's really difficult. So really proud that we have Western Pennsylvania as one of our sites in the Better Buildings Challenge. Next slide, please. And this is just a little bit of a taste when you go down in. This is a highly secure facility. I wouldn't even have time to talk about security on this call, but it's probably one of the most secure facilities you'll see. And I say this in front of some folks at DOE, and they definitely know about security. So this is one of the most popular sites that our customers inquire about and that we talk about. Very proud of it, and I couldn't be happier to really call this site home. And the operations team I know very well there. They do a fantastic job taking care of the energy efficiency practices and are always willing to step forward and help when it comes to projects and trying new things. So couldn't be more proud of the Western PA site. And this is one of those projects. So this was a taste of, this data hall looks a little bit different now. It's a lot more full. There's some cages in here, but this is just an idea or kind of showcases what the inside looks like, right? So you can see the stone wall in the back, but even underground where it's naturally cool, things heat up, right? Servers create hot air, so we've got to contain it. And this is some really great containment. These are actual hard doors that slide, that go on the racks right on the outside, so that we can direct the air in the right place, right? And that's really what it's all about. And we're even looking at some really unconventional ways of directing air in our Manassas data center that could maybe apply at some other places, but it's all about, you know, when you look at like the aerodynamics of an airplane or something like that, you'll see computational fluid dynamics diagrams with all the little lines that are like green and red. Using that software and using that modeling is what really enables us and enables other folks in the data center industry to make good decisions about air management, airflow, and where everything's going. Next slide. And Maria, I saw you talking, you're on mute.
No, I'm dying to get to the questions on, so let's,
yeah.
but this, I was waiting for this picture too. This is one of my favorite pictures, so.
Yeah, this is literally my favorite picture probably of the underground, because this is the lake. And just to wrap things up on this photo, no, the typical questions, no, there's no fish, no sharks, no creatures. There's nothing like living underground because there's no like nutrients. So even like spiders, like I can't tell you the last time I ever saw a spider in the underground. But yeah, this is the lake. It's roughly, I think, like 35 to 40 acres of lake. The water, the chilled water temperature down there is about 57 degrees. We have heat exchangers and other mechanisms to make sure that the lake temperature stays where it should be, make sure the levels stay where it should be. That team monitors that like clockwork. And it is kind of deep in some spots. It's like as low as 2 feet in some spots. I think it's up to about 6 feet. And there are kayaks and wetsuits for when folks have to go out and check on sensors. So it's one of the most interesting things someone could see. And I can't wait for the day that we can get the DOE team out to Western PA to tour it firsthand. So I hope I painted a picture and told you about what we're doing here at Iron Mountain Data Centers. And yeah, most importantly, our achievements. So we'll wrap that up there. If anyone has any questions about the data that we've set forward or what we've achieved, you can contact myself or Jamie Weibel here in trust me, I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about what we have going on.
For good reason. It's all really cool stuff.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jim. No, that was great. You guys have got so many different data centers that, you know, have utilized different opportunities and technologies. The lake is really cool. So I know we want to see if Abigail had any questions. I also know there was some other questions that some media had sent us beforehand. So we can have one of the C+C team read those out. But let's just start with Abigail. Is Abigail still with us? And I just want to make sure if you had questions, Abigail, we would start with you.
No, I don't have any questions as of yet, but I might think of some in a few minutes.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. And I know, Nathan, you had gotten some questions from other folks in the media that may or may not have been able to join us, but wanted asked. And so we could turn those over to Jim and Jamie, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. First one is, if you had to pick one, what technology or practice has had the greatest impact on energy reduction across your data centers?
The low-hanging fruit is air management. You can replace all kinds of equipment in legacy older data centers that maybe weren't purpose-built, and that's expensive, but it does make a big difference. But at the same time, if you have a newer data center like our Manassas campus, the number one thing you can do is keep an eye on the data and look at how much air that's just kind of freely floating around. If you do those two things, it's the low-hanging fruit. It doesn't cost anything to monitor what you're doing. It's just using what you already have in the building management system, keeping an eye on what's like physically in front of you. And then from there, once you have your data and once you assess what your air management practices are like, then you can make a case to change it a little bit with what you've got, and then make a further case for infrastructure improvements if you need to. So that's the biggest thing.
Great, thanks,
Great.
Jim. And I think we'll just do one more here. What's your process for site selection, and when in that process are you considering energy and carbon goals?
So site selection is really interesting, and I don't want to speak for our real estate folks, but the data center market's really dynamic. There's a lot of local law and regulation you take into account when you're selecting sites. Obviously, we had the Western PA site by default. So like, of course, if everyone could land their data center underground, they would, right? But everyone, I think in the data center industry knows that Northern Virginia is a massive hub, you know, Silicon Valley, Dallas, Atlanta. So my answer would be, it doesn't matter. It's agnostic. I think wherever you land your data center, you have to be able to do two things. One, purchase your renewables from a local source, as local as you can, so it's meaningful. And then number two, utilize that green power responsibly. And it doesn't matter if you're in Singapore or London or Atlanta, you can still be as efficient in all of those places. Now, of course, a colder climate, like if you're up in the Nordics, you can utilize the cold air year round for free cooling. So of course, again, if everyone could pick their ideal data center, it would be in a cold place. But that's just not how the world works. And you have to take connectivity into consideration and how folks can get to the site, and also available space. So I would say location agnostic, just do the right thing and keep an eye on your data.
That's awesome, Jim. Thank you. My guess is there are other questions, but we know how to get a hold of you and Jamie and Julia. So let me just ask last call for any questions that anybody else might have. I know we're over time, but it was too cool. I mean, how often do I get to hear about kayaks going out and doing site checks? I mean, that's very cool. So underground, right? Underground kayak. Yeah, I should have mentioned that. So that is very, very cool. Well, on behalf of the Department of Energy, we really want to thank Iron Mountain, not only for sharing what they're doing and how they're doing it and the success they're seeing so that others can benefit from your wisdom and your experience, but for also being such a great partner. I mean, as you mentioned, you're part of the Waste Pilot and you're working with us on a bunch of things. And that's really important because this is really what it's going to take to move this country to where we need to be to address the challenges in the future. So really, on behalf of the Department of Energy, we want to thank you, not only for today, but really for your partnership in Better Buildings. It's really tremendous. So with that, Thank you. We'll be seeing this video on the Better Building Solutions Center. We appreciate all your hard work and look forward to continuing to learn from you as you continue to push the envelope on things that are opportunities to save energy and reduce waste in the buildings and data centers that you have and operate. So thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.